I wanted to be sure that during these high holy days, if I'm not speaking sermons on Israel, that Israel is brought to our attention in a way that's elucidating, so that all of us leave the sanctuary with greater clarity than sometimes we'll find on websites and that often we'll find in newspapers or on the news. So I've asked Keith Elkins, who is extraordinarily passionate about Israel and extraordinarily involved in pro-Israel politics in terms of, or maybe not pro-Israel politics, in AIPAC, which is pro-Israel politics. It's about supporting Israel from the United States. It's about strengthening our understanding of Israel so that we realize our shared values. So Keith, if you would, please.
Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova to all of you. Cantor Ron, thank you so much for your passion and leadership in support of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, as well as Israel and a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. You're a true inspiration to all of us. Today is a very special day for a number of reasons. It is Shabbat. It is Yom Kippur. It also happens to be the day that my beautiful wife Jackie and I are celebrating our 23rd anniversary. And no, we didn't go out to breakfast first. Today is the day that we are inscribed in the Book of Life for a good and meaningful year. And I'm truly honored to be up here this morning to speak with you about something that I know Cantor Ron, Cantor Michael, my entire family, and so many of you in this room care very deeply about: the safety, security, and prosperity of the state of Israel. To be clear, I am not a member of the AIPAC staff. I don't get paid by AIPAC. I'm simply passionate about doing what I can with the time that's been given to me on this earth to make a meaningful and positive difference for Israel and the Jewish people, and the world for that matter. About 6 years ago, I made a decision to find a vehicle through which I can have the greatest impact to protect, preserve, and ensure the future of the state of Israel. And I came to the conclusion that there's no more effective way to do this than through AIPAC. We're living in a very unsettling and anxious time for Israel. Since I only have a few minutes, I'm going to take us for a quick spin around the Middle East, or certain issues in the Middle East. Any one of these topics is worthy of a much more extensive discussion, and there are many that I won't touch upon, although if you are interested, we'll be having a discussion group after the morning service is over, and we can go through that. As is often the case, when discussing the Middle East, I must warn you that this will not be uplifting, except in one respect. There's actually something we can all do to positively impact the situation. There are steps that we can take that will make a meaningful and positive difference for the state of Israel. Okay, here we go on the quick tour around the Middle East. The Arab Spring. I think we've all read a fair amount about it and seen this on TV and heard it on the radios. It's inspired a great deal of hope throughout the world. It has really created some earnest and excitement, genuine hope for democracies and human rights. At the same time, though, it's also produced a great deal of anxiety, particularly for the state of Israel. The Camp David Peace Treaty, signed in 1979 by Begin and Sadat, has been the cornerstone of Israel's security for more than 30 years. Today, Egypt is filled with a number of political parties vying for power. Of course, there's the largest and most organized, the Muslim Brotherhood. Not a real fan of the home team. But what most people don't realize is that among the numerous other parties, which are considered secular, not one of them has come out in clear support of this peace treaty with Israel. In fact, of all these secular parties, the positions range from either wanting to revisit certain components of it to altogether abrogating it. This would have very severe and significant consequences for Israel. Syria. There's not a lot good that can be said about Israel for looking as many decades back as you want to, other than the fact that the border between Israel and Syria has been relatively quiet until recently. But note that within the last few days, as President Assad has been doing what he's been doing to his civilians, his population, he warned that if NATO takes any action against Syria, what's he going to do? He's going to launch missiles at Tel Aviv, hundreds and hundreds of missiles at Tel Aviv. Lebanon, northern border of Israel. essentially a failed state now. It is controlled by one of the most notorious terrorist regimes in the world, Hezbollah, who has now amassed more than 60,000 missiles, more than many countries. Israeli civilian population is well within range of all these missiles. Let's look at Gaza. People have been saying for years, sometimes you might need to do more. Israel might need to do more than just simply try to sit down and work out a peace with the Palestinians. So what happened in 2005 is Israel did just that. They made a unilateral withdrawal of all of its people from Gaza. They uprooted, they pulled them out of their homes, their schools, their synagogues. They actually dug up the graves in the cemeteries and moved them. In return for this unilateral withdrawal, what occurred was more than 10,000 rockets fired at civilians, schools, etc. Just a few weeks ago, 8 Israeli citizens were killed by terrorists from Gaza heading through the Sinai now, which is no longer all that secure with this uprising. And on an almost daily basis, new terrorist plots need to be foiled. It's a very, very unsettling circumstance. And let's not forget Iran. As it's marching towards acquiring nuclear weapons, an event that would truly be game-changing, not only for Israel and the region, but for the entire world. This country, whose government overtly calls for the destruction of the state of Israel, who denies the Holocaust, or at least states it's greatly exaggerated, who claims that 9/11 was a U.S. conspiracy, who regularly supplies terrorist organizations throughout the region with weapons, including Hezbollah on Israel's northern border and Hamas on the southern border. It's incredible that a madman like Ahmadinejad, Iran's president, can overtly call for the destruction of a member state of the UN, state of Israel, and yet walk freely around the streets of New York City, while Israeli's government officials cannot, until the last week or so, travel even to England due to fear of being arrested. Finally, let me turn back to Egypt again to describe one event that took place a few weeks ago that I'm sure you're all aware of. The protesters, who again, this democratic Arab uprising, Arab Spring, the protesters ended up forming a mob. That mob, there are a variety of embassies, as you can imagine, in Cairo. That mob ended up attacking and breaking into the Israeli embassy, broke through the security gates, broke through past the guards, used sledgehammers and whatnot, and ultimately broke actually into the high-rise embassy tower. The ambassador and his family were evacuated, and the remaining Israeli personnel were rushed into one safe room that existed, where the only thing separating them from a very angry mob was one door. As the mob was banging on the door, while the embassy personnel were just on the other side, Israeli government officials were frantically, as they were looking at this on security cameras from Jerusalem, were frantically calling the Egyptian government up to the various highest levels. The only thing standing between life and death of those Israeli embassy personnel was that one door. Not only was Israel not able to get any traction with these calls, but they literally couldn't even get the phone picked up. Their calls were not taken by anyone in the Egyptian government. Finally, Prime Minister Netanyahu reached out to President Obama, and the White House contacted those same Egyptian officials who were miraculously available, and they then dispersed the mob, and the Israeli embassy personnel were ultimately safe. It's not only depressing when you consider all these events, but could also be quite daunting. It's difficult to feel how there's anything that we can do to help. The ubiquitous double standards among the press, our universities, the United Nations, and so many other nations around the world leaves many of us simply shaking our heads, yelling at our TVs, radios, and newspapers. In my view, Israel continues to survive and thrive for two primary reasons. One, the strength and resilience of its people. But frankly, I don't believe that alone is enough anymore. And the second is its relationship with the United States. And here's the thing. As for the second prong, all of us in this room can actually do something about this. The answer is to get involved with AIPAC. AIPAC's entire mission is to protect and guard that relationship between the United States and Israel. AIPAC is fiercely bipartisan in this effort and does not launch any initiative unless they are co-sponsored by a Democrat and a Republican. It's easy to draw an analogy between the United States and that one door that saved the lives of those Israeli embassy personnel in Egypt. But AIPAC has a mere 10% professional lobbyists in our nation's capital. And as you know, there are 435 members in the House of Representatives and 100 members in the Senate. It's hard for 10 staff members to cover all that ground, and that's where we come in. Lay leaders like Cantor Ron, like you, and like me. We need to be well informed on these issues, and AIPAC's an incredible resource and very credible resource in the halls of Washington for this, and build close relationships with all 535 members. Those relationships have enormous consequences for the state of Israel and for the Jewish people. They're the difference between Israel receiving more than $3 billion in foreign aid that enables it to defend itself in this very hostile neighborhood. It's the difference between the Iron Dome being there to protect its civilian population from rockets being fired at its school children and not. It is the difference between biting sanctions being imposed on Iran that hopefully will make the difference and prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Yom Kippur is a time when we hear the story of Jonah, who tried to run from his responsibilities when God directed him to go to Nineveh, only to find that in the end, he couldn't run from his responsibility. AIPAC's not a charity. AIPAC is our responsibility to our forefathers and to our current brothers and sisters in the state of Israel, and to our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. We've been handed the baton from the prior generation that established the state of Israel in 1948 out of the ashes of the Holocaust. And it is on our watch now, and it is our responsibility to the Jewish people, and there's actually something we can do about it. Shortly, Yom Kippur will be ending, and the shofar will sound, and the words Leshana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim will be uttered, next year in Jerusalem. Isn't it amazing that words that have literally been said for thousands of years can be acted upon? We can all be in Jerusalem next year. There are materials outside about AIPAC and about the upcoming policy conference in Washington, D.C. I have one ask of all of you. Please join Cantor Ron and me, along with my wife, my mom, my kids, and a number of other VOS congregants in Washington, D.C. next March for 3 of the most important days affecting Israel's future. I promise you, you will be truly grateful that you did, and you will be inspired and impacted in a way that will be truly life-changing for you, for Israel, and for the Jewish people. I wish all of you a year filled with happiness, good health, meaning, and purpose. Shana Tova, Gamar Hatima Tova.